Hi everyone, I've included a couple video links that cover the cell and the digestive process, digestive system. If you're fairly comfortable with those topics, you really don't need to review the videos. However, if you'd like a refresher, please, of course, look at the links. There's a couple topics that I feel could be covered a bit more in depth, and those are probiotics and the regulation and coordination of the digestive process. So I'll be reviewing those with you today. I want to talk about probiotics first. And when we think about probiotics, let's first talk about what they actually are, a definition. They're active cultures or actual strains of bacteria that we give PO or orally for a health benefit. And you must have at least 100 million live active bacteria per gram, or 1 to 10 billion CFUs, colony forming units, per dose for benefit. So unless you're receiving the appropriate dose of the probiotic, it really isn't going to have any added benefit to you. And often you need a pharmacist to work with you or review this with you to make sure that you're getting the appropriate bacteria in the appropriate CFUs. The two most common bacteria that are administered are lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. In terms of food sources, we usually get these from yogurt or buttermilk or kefir. Health benefits that might be seen with the administration of probiotics include improvement in inflammatory bowel disease, so autoimmune disease, and irritable bowel syndrome. However, here's your red flag. Take note, word of caution. If you have an immune system that is impaired, I would not recommend that you take these live active bacteria or ingest them. If you have cancer, if you have HIV or AIDS, this is not something that would be recommended for patients with these diagnoses. In terms of coordination and regulation of digestion, so we're talking about the digestive process, there's two separate systems of the nervous system, two separate pathways which regulate the digestive process. The first is a sympathetic nervous system, which puts the brakes on, if you will, slows everything down, slows down secretions, and slows down motility. The parasympathetic nervous system gears everything up. So it stimulates peristalsis, gets hormone and enzyme secretion going in full force, and stimulates GI reflexes. And this is done primarily through the action of the vagus nerve. The enteric nervous system is what is sometimes referred to as I'll do that in quotes, the second brain. The gut actually is sometimes called the second brain because it has its own neurons, and the enteric nervous system communicates, the cells within the enteric nervous system can communicate with each other. And they serve to regulate secretion, motility, and growth of the gastrointestinal tract. So obviously that's very important. Examples of peptides. Let's talk about some of these. There's 4 major ones that I want to talk about. Gastrin is secreted in the antrum of the stomach and the proximal small intestine from G cells. And hydrochloric acid, pepsin, and histamine are released when the hormone gastrin is present. Cholecystokinin, or CCK, is secreted in the proximal small intestine, and it's a digestive it causes digestive enzymes to be released into the duodenum and also facilitates the release of bile. And it may influence how we perceive appetite in our brain. PYY, or peptide YY, is secreted in the ileum and the colon. So the distal end of the small intestine, the final portion of the small intestine, the ileum and the colon, it serves to suppress or decrease appetite. And it's released when fat is sensed or found. I don't know if that's the appropriate word, but when fat enters the small intestine, in response to that, peptide YY or PYY is released. Motilin is released in the small intestine, the colon in general, and that promotes gastric emptying and stimulates the motility of the small intestine, so to move the food and the nutrients through the small intestine. Paracrines simply refer to cells that communicate with each other. So we have this network of cells and the gastrointestinal tract that actually communicate with each other. And there's several of those that I'd like to review with you as well. First of which is somatostatin, and that's secreted by the delta cells in the pancreas, the antrum of the stomach, the portion of the stomach, the antrum, and the duodenum, which of course is the proximal portion of the small intestine. This serves to inhibit or prevent the release of gastrin, and it usually is only active when the pH of the stomach is less than 2. So obviously we don't want any gastrin to be further released to stimulate hydrochloric acid production when we already have a pH that's less than 2. Histamine, that causes the allergic reactions, is also found in your GI tract, and that's secreted from mast cells, and it causes the parietal cells to release gastrin and acetylcholine. Glucagon-like peptide, or GLP, is released in the distal small intestine, the colon, and it stimulates the release of insulin from the pancreas and inhibits glucagon secretion. Insulin-like growth factor 1 is found throughout the GI tract and the endocrine cells, and it increases the proliferation of the GI tract, so the growth and the turnover of those cells in the GI tract. And just the mere presence of food in the GI tract actually stimulates insulin-like growth factor 1. In terms of appetite regulating hormones, if there was ever probably two hormones probably that I'm guessing the pharmaceutical industry is looking at for appetite suppression, I would put my money on these two. So ghrelin, or ghrelin, depending on how you want to pronounce it, is secreted in the stomach from endocrine cells, and it acts on the hypothalamus to stimulate appetite. And what's really interesting about this hormone is patients that have had the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass procedure have diminished levels of ghrelin in their system. Now, it's not fully understood what happens, but in working with these patients, I've seen people with an insatiable appetite virtually having to force themselves to eat following this surgery. And eventually, the appetite does tend to return to a normal level. Maybe not the what we would call the premorbid level prior to the surgery, but a more normal level. Again, I think I have several articles for you to read regarding this, and it's certainly something that you could look up. But we know that people eat not only in response to physiological hunger, but there are emotions and other external cues that are factors that play a role in why we eat or what stimulates us to eat. But these two hormones certainly have gotten their fair share of research. Leptin is secreted from adipose tissue, and this serves to suppress appetite. So they, literally work against each other. It was thought that obesity might be caused from a deficiency in leptin. We now know that's not the case. There are certain very rare genetic disorders where there is inadequate leptin produced, but it's not something that's common in the population. I want to talk to you about probably one of my most favorite case studies, Paul, the probiotic puppy. And if you wait one moment, I will go get Paul and introduce him to you and discuss this very interesting matter. This is Paul. Paul, okay, look at the camera, buddy. Paul, the probiotic puppy, otherwise affectionately known as Pollywog Dog, and my blue tick baby. He has had a number of issues since we got him. He was a rescue from Tennessee with his digestive tract. He had hemorrhagic gastroenteritis, HGE, which is known to occur in canines. It's an idiopathic disease, and he's had several reoccurrences of this. And in addition to the HGE, some of the symptomology includes intractable vomiting, halitosis. He's got beautiful teeth, wonderful dental hygiene, and what we end up doing is putting him on an antibiotic called Flagyl, which we use in humans. It's also called metronidazole. It's used to treat C. difficile colitis, and the beautiful thing about this antibiotic is that it kills the bad bacteria, if you will, and does not harm the good bacteria. However, we can't keep him on an antibiotic forever. So veterinary medicine, which I often feel is leaps and bounds ahead of human medicine, especially in terms of nutrition, has recently come out with recommendations to put little guys like Pollywog Dog that are struggling with this issue with gut fermentation on a probiotic. And the colony forming units are now recommended for canines. Can you see him? He's just adorable. We love him so much. Is 10 billion CFUs. It had been recommended in the 5 CFU range. So he's on a probiotic every morning. I put it in his food. He never knows what he's getting. And he's also on special high fiber food. So as you contemplate your careers, if you are looking to make a change, please don't, Paul's going to get down now, excuse me. Please don't forget our furry friends, our canine and feline friends, because some of the same nutrition principles that apply to humans also apply to them. I will see you next time. I hope you have a great evening. Take care now. Bye-bye.